Good evening, friends and the audience. It's good to be here with you. My name is Peter Matthews, to introduce myself once again, and this is Fighting for Economic and Social Justice in the World. And we are here this evening to particularly highlight the problem of unemployment, and especially hidden unemployment. The unemployment rate officially, that's put out by the U.S. government's jobs report in just recently, was 5%, actually 4.9% officially. But in reality, if we look at the scholars who have gone and looked at the various workers who are stopped looking for work, the underemployed who are working part-time, who would like full-time work, those who are only temporary workers, in other words, those who really want to work full-time, and add them to the rolls of the unemployed, which make this the real unemployment rate, the actual real unemployment rate is 10% instead of 5%. It's twice of what it is officially. And this is a real problem because many people don't understand that the official rates being put out by the federal government, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, is not an accurate reflection of what's really going on in the American economy. There are many, many Americans who've stopped looking for work because they've given up. They've had a very difficult time, or they couldn't qualify for the jobs that were available in their area. And frankly, the jobs have been added, an average of about 200,000 jobs a month in the last recovery of several years, is not enough to actually employ the newly enfranchised 18-year-olds who have graduated from high school or want to go to work or who want to go on to college. It doesn't include those who've turned 18 and want to work, the new people coming in the workforce. It doesn't actually address their needs for a job. Instead, the 200,000 jobs or so that have been created in each year for the last several years in the recovery has not been enough to make the American economy really recover in terms of numbers of jobs, full-time jobs, and also in terms of paychecks. The American median income, that means half the American people made above this amount and half made below it. That's the middle income, right in the middle. The median family income a few years ago was $56,000 a year. It then dropped after the Great Recession. It dropped to $51,000 a year. And just this past year, it recovered by only about $1,000 more to about $52,000 a year household income. So real household income, the amount of money American households have been able to bring in from their jobs to be able to go to work and to be able to buy the things they need for their homes and households, to go out and grocery shop without stress, be able to buy clothing for their kids, pay for their children's expenses in school, and help save for their older children's college. That money is just not there anymore. So when real income has fallen by 8% and has not risen back up by more than 1 or 2%, you've got a major problem here in the economy. We know the middle class has been shrinking. It has now shrunk by about 8% since the 1970s. That's statistics from the UC Berkeley studies have come out, and many other studies corroborate that. So when the middle class shrinks, the rich have gotten richer, the poor have gotten poorer, and this is a recipe for disaster for a democracy or for a stable society. If we look at the number of people who are in the actual workforce, it's called the workforce participation rate. It has gone from 65% participation rate of those who are eligible to work and who want to work. Over 65% was the case just a few years ago. It's dropped down to 62% today. So over 3% of the American labor participation workforce has actually shrunk, which means we have less people working in proportion to those who are actually want to work and are able to work than we did back a few years ago. All of this is bad news, and much of it is attributed to the Great Recession, but many of these trends actually began before that. So the question now arises, what can we do about it? What are these presidential candidates offering in terms of helping the middle class and helping them get back on their feet, helping us get back on our feet again, helping us save money and be able to afford college for our children? And that's what the topic of this discussion will be today with the audience. And I welcome all of you to come in and take part in making phone calls at 7:15 Pacific time. From 7:15 to 7:30, we're going to open up the phone lines. Before I continue, let me just mention that tomorrow evening is the presidential debates between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump in Las Vegas, and that's why we're going to postpone our program by 1 hour. Instead of coming on at 7 o'clock to 7:30, tomorrow night we're going to do a debate-related broadcast with the audience taking part, with you guys calling in from 8 o'clock Pacific Standard Time to 8:30, 8 to 8:30. At 8:15, you'll be calling in to give us your views on what happened in the debate, or what you think you might want to hear about it, and what you want to know about the candidates, and what they proposed if they win the election to help to bring about for the United States of America. This is a very unusual election. It's got the two most unpopular candidates in our modern history running against each other. For various reasons, people are going to vote against the other candidate to get their own candidate elected, because not so much because they care about their candidate or are inspired by their candidate that they support, but instead they are fearful of the other candidate coming into office and what that other candidate might do to the economy, to our children's future, to social issues, human rights issues, freedom of speech issues, freedom of association. Those kinds of important social freedoms are very important to American people, and they're concerned about if one of the other candidates comes into office, what are they going to do about these things? We will talk about that tomorrow night in greater detail, and I want to just continue a bit on this economic issue of jobs. What is really a job for? It's for not only just making a living and being able to pay your rent, which of course is the most important function of having a good job, the high-paying job in the middle class in the United States of America, but also what a job is good for is the job gives us meaning. It gives us dignity. It makes us feel that we are human, that we can actually go out and earn our living by using our labor to produce products and services that other human beings can use as well. So we're sharing our labor with other people when we work and when we produce products and we produce services. And whether you're a firefighter or a teacher or a person who works in an automobile factory or builds robots, these are all important functions of the economy, and the economy is the foundation of the human society. Without an economy, we wouldn't even be alive, because the economy, of course, is defined as the system of production, distribution, and consumption of the goods and services in society. The system of production, distribution, and consumption of the goods and services in society. That's the economy, and the economy is the foundation, because without the economy, we can't go on further and live in the superstructure, in the higher realm of human existence. We cannot really, if we're hungry and don't have enough food, we don't have enough shelter or housing because it's too expensive, and some of us become homeless. We have to move in with several relatives. If we can't shelter our children from the cold and give them a secure environment to learn, then we and our children cannot live a truly human existence. President Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, came up with an excellent plan called the Economic Bill of Rights in 1944. I believe in his inaugural address, in his last term of office, President Franklin Roosevelt said that the political Bill of Rights that we had, the American Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to our Constitution, which the founders brought in and ratified early on through the states, way back in the 1790s. These bills of rights were very important, the first 10 amendments, because they gave us the dignity, human dignity, and freedom to have the right to conscience, to freedom of speech, to freedom of conscience and religion, or freedom from religion, freedom of association with like-minded people. These political freedoms were very important in the past, and they still are, said President Roosevelt. But as the 1930s were there, when he was announcing this in the 1940s actually, he said that they were not enough. The political Bill of Rights are not enough to guarantee a fully human life in a democracy, and we need an economic Bill of Rights, said President Roosevelt. An economic Bill of Rights, among other things, would include the right to a good job with fair remuneration or pay, where you can actually pay for a living, pay for your expenses, support a family. And the other things would be a right to a fair profit for small businesses and all businesses, a fair profit, not a gouging profit that rips people off, rips off your workers, and rips off the customer, but a fair profit for business people to be able to make, said Roosevelt, is another economic right in the Bill of Rights. The right to health care when we're ill, to be able to recover and become well again and continue our lives in the pursuit of our happiness, as our Declaration guarantees government should guarantee to us. The right to pursuit of happiness. We can't pursue our happiness when we're ill. So health care was also mentioned in his economic Bill of Rights. And many other economic freedoms were mentioned there. And yet today, how many years later, from 1944 until 2016, that is a good 60, at least 60 or 70 years has already passed since that time, and we still have not guaranteed all Americans this economic Bill of Rights. Let me speak of one in particular, the right to a secure and high-paying job that would give us an adequate living provided for us and our families. This is something we can have in this country. We can have full employment. Right now, why is there 10% unemployment if you look at the real unemployment, and probably even more if you look at some people who stopped looking for work permanently? That's another couple of million people who are off the rolls entirely. If we add them to the rolls, it might come up to 12 million people unemployed. So we're looking at actually about 16 million people unemployed if you include all of the categories of underemployment, unemployment, permanent unemployment who rolled off the rolls. And that's 16 million Americans without the right and without being able to work with a job and with a job in a job that really gives them a feeling of dignity and of purpose. And let me tell you something else. When you take a job away from a person, it really reduces their whole sense of well-being. I mean, even the short periods that some of us were unemployed when we were in college, or when we tried to find work after college and couldn't find it for a while, we had to accept jobs that were just menial jobs that didn't pay very well, or other jobs that were inadequate. Even sometimes we couldn't get jobs for several weeks or months. You know how you felt. You felt pretty much kind of, in a small sense, a bit worthless, because you couldn't go out and help other people. You couldn't buy what you needed, so you can go out and share with other people the fruits of your labor. So work gives us dignity. It gives us our humanity to some extent, to a large extent. It provides us to be able to fulfill our humanity, our full human potential. And when you don't have full employment, you have unemployment. Now, in a capitalist economy such as ours, there was actually an attempt to bring in full employment, full 100% employment, and that was the Humphrey-Hawkins bill, introduced by Senator Hubert Humphrey in conjunction with Congressperson Augustus Hawkins from Los Angeles. These two men in Congress, back in the 1970s, I believe it was, introduced the Humphrey-Hawkins bill. It could have been the 80s, actually. Humphrey-Hawkins bill would have provided full employment in America. It would have established government paid for community service jobs that would actually be productive. For example, jobs going out and be able to have the government hire engineers to rebuild our roads and our bridges, to be able to hire teachers in overcrowded classrooms, reduce class size, to be able to hire firefighters and police people for community-based policing. Have government pay for the salaries of these folks, because we need them. Government could actually even hire child care workers and train them fully to provide universal child care on site for working moms and dads who need that child care for their children, and the children need it even more. We could expand Head Start and hire more Head Start teachers, which is such an important program that's shown to work to encourage young people when they're young to go out and learn and to be inquisitive and to become very productive intellectually, and then later on they go on to college. And the Head Start children from low-income families do quite a bit better than those from low-income families who do not attend Head Start or preschool. So we know those are public sector jobs that could be funded fully, and Hawkins and Humphrey bill actually proposed that we hire Americans directly, sort of like what President Roosevelt did in the New Deal, to do all these different things. And Roosevelt actually even hired artists to paint murals on the side of buildings and cities to beautify them in the Depression, to get people's spirits up. He hired actors to go around, and directors of plays such as Orson Welles, who took a production company around the country traveling, so that the small-town Americans who had never seen a professional acting troupe before could see real actors, professional actors, come and bring the top art to them in terms of drama and theater on the stage. How uplifting and wonderful that was, that President Roosevelt saw it important to bring to honor the arts and the people of America who can enjoy and be inspired by the arts. And we've been cutting our arts programs in our schools because of a lack of funding. We need to bring those back and hire those art teachers, and let our children go to after-school programs that would include theater, arts, dance. All of these things could be done with a full employment bill that Congress should pass. You say, where's the money going to come from? Well, there's a lot of money out there in the federal government that is being spent unwisely, and in many cases the money is not being brought in to be spent from corporate loopholes, which many big corporations pay no taxes because of legally passed loopholes passed by Congress. For example, you've got corporations who take advantage of the net operating loss allowance. So do wealthy people like Donald Trump. He was able to use the NOL, the net operating loss allowance, to write off $900 million of loss in a given year, which meant he could write off all of the income for the next several years, maybe even up to 18 years, they're saying, to not pay any taxes, because that's legal. It was passed by Congress, and someone as wealthy as Donald Trump, a corporate owner, could take advantage of that. That net operating loss allowance loophole should be closed, and I believe Trump has come out and said he would support closing it to bring the money in for programs that we need. Certainly I'd like to hear Hillary Clinton talk about taxing the super rich a bit more and closing loopholes to bring the money in for after-school programs, public works. We need to research and develop a high-speed railroad, a rail system that would be pollution-free, such as they have in China and Germany, the maglev trains, the pollution-free electric trains in China that go up to 200 miles per hour that could get us from here to San Francisco in a couple hours. If we had a maglev train as they have in Germany or Japan that goes 350 miles per hour, we could travel from Los Angeles to San Francisco in just 1 hour, and we could actually work in San Francisco and live in Los Angeles. That would release us from job lock and job loss, and help people find new jobs who are highly qualified but live in one city 400 miles away. That wouldn't be a barrier because we'd have the maglev train. So these kinds of technologies, green technologies, windmills to produce electricity, tide power, wind power, generators in our tides with the waves going back and forth, turning the generator and generating electricity, a new electric grid that could be built by our engineers and by our construction workers that would be tremendously efficient. Right now we're losing about 50% of our electricity in the old electric grid by the time it gets to its destination. We could have a new electric grid, really energy efficient, or even rooftop solar for people who have solar, or have homes that can put solar panels on their rooftop and generate electricity, and then they could get paid a feed-in tariff, a certain amount of money from the utility company for the electricity they produce that is beyond what they use. This has been done in Germany, and Germany has come up with 50% of its electricity produced by renewable energy sources, including rooftop solar, wind power, etc. Looks like it's time to get phone calls, folks, because someone is already calling, so we're ready to hear from you. Let's go ahead and start with the phone calls and discussion. Good evening. You're on with Peter Matthews. How are you this evening? Who's calling, please?
This is Frank. How you doing?
Oh, Frank. How are you doing, sir? How are you doing today?
All right.
Okay, what's in the news? What's on your mind today?
I'm enjoying your talk. Here's a couple of things we need to talk about.
Okay.
The first thing is that how do we make sure in the future that Labor Department is putting up the right information? Because if we face this unemployment issue 15, 20 years ago, we would have known that we got so many people unemployed.
Frank, could you hold on 1 second? Another call's coming in. I'm going to put you on hold for 1 second. I'll be right back. 1 second.
Okay.
Hello? You're on with Peter Matthews. Who's this, please? Hello? Hello, who's calling, please? Frank, you still there?
Yeah,
Okay, I lost that caller. We've got to get a better system here. We'll do that next time. Okay, so your point is that the Labor Department should put out accurate statistics that tells the truth about the workforce?
Correct. If we'd known about this, I knew about 20 years ago that something isn't right. We had more people unemployed than they're claiming, and because of this, we got so many people who are unemployed, and now they're all voting for Donald Trump.
Okay, you've got a great point there. So if these statistics have been accurate, and we knew that more people are unemployed than what was being put out there, we knew that we had a crisis to take care of and to address. And now that we haven't taken care of that crisis fully, we've got someone like Donald Trump coming up here and waving the flag of more employment, of stopping our job loss to China, and putting tariffs on products coming from Mexico. So he's coming up with a populist agenda, which we wouldn't even have someone like that having to come up and do this or say these things or appeal to voters if we'd taken care of business earlier by being accurate. Right, Frank? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly, and I think the Congress, hopefully new Congress will pass a law or regulations making sure that the Labor Department does what it's supposed to do, not just cook, the book and all of that stuff that they're doing.
Excellent point. So if the new Congress, now when it comes in in January, you're saying it needs to act on this and move to make the labor statistics completely accurate, including hidden unemployment, underemployment, looking at the workforce participation rate and seeing who's dropped out of it, and then coming up with an accurate figure so the government can act forcefully to create employment. And don't forget, the government can actually give small business loans at low interest rates to create jobs so we can have entrepreneurship rewarded as well. What do you think about it, Frank?
Well, no, that's what we need, because, if we had accurate numbers 20 years ago, we would have seen how many jobs in the United States and going to China.
Yes.
And I should have raised the red flag that, jobs are leaving a little too fast. They have a problem with, making sure that jobs are, created in America as well as in China.
Yes.
Just that we want to make sure that we take care of the people here first.
Absolutely. We need to take care of Americans with work here first, and then we can export jobs to help other people, other countries through fair trade, not export jobs, keep our jobs here, but help other countries create jobs there through fair trade. In other words, what do you think about fair trade? Have you heard about? Yes.
We have to have what I call equal growth.
Equal growth.
So you don't grow one area of the world at the expense of the other area of the world. We don't want to do that.
So we don't want to grow one part of the world at the expense of the other part, right? Where the other part gets more poor. That's true, exactly. That's true. Fair trade.
Fair trade, equal growth, Washington, does she really understand what's going on? Is she going to take care of the people who are voting for Donald Trump to make sure that she creates jobs in those states for the desperate need for jobs? And also, I noticed that in inner cities like South Central LA, there's a lot of shooting going on and all that stuff, and they don't have jobs over there that people can get. People have to leave the city,
Right.
to other cities to get a job.
So you've got major problems in the inner cities in Los Angeles and other parts of the country because of a deindustrialization of the inner city. When work disappears, as William Julius Wilson, the great sociologist, has written about, when jobs have been outsourced, the inner city becomes desperate in many cases. Some of them go to drug dealing, selling of products like that, and crime and hopelessness enters the picture, and you have more devastation. And this could be avoided. Now, let me just talk a bit about fair trade, Frank. Thank you for your call. Let me hang up a second so someone else was calling in, okay? They can get through.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Well, folks, the fair trade model is extremely important that we understand this, because for far too long, American elites and the elites in Mexico and Canada have been promoting free trade. And that is, open the borders up for trade with no tariffs between the borders of countries. In other words, let countries export their jobs to other countries that have cheap labor markets, like the U.S. General Motors shutting down a factory here in Santa Fe Springs in California, moving it to Mexico, the factory opening it there, and paying the Mexican worker a fraction of the wage that the American unionized worker used to get. Well, those jobs were a loss to Mexico. At the same time, the Mexican workers didn't do any better. They did worse, actually. Many of them were driven off their land. The farmers were driven off their land by NAFTA and free trade agreements regarding dumping of American corn on Mexico and driving out the small family farmer through free trade. Those farmers went to work in the automobile factory for that GM paid them very little money, and many times they couldn't make a living. So those former auto workers came across the border through illegal immigration. Some of them came over here for that to find better work. Now, you have to have fair trade. If we had fair trade, we would require that any international trade agreement would first of all say that there have to be labor agreements and environmental agreements and human rights agreements. Number one, the wages in the low-wage country that we open up a free trade agreement with have to be increased step by step over the years before we allow that country into the free trade zone with us. To get closer to our wages here, Mexico has to raise its wages step by step, and then we also let Mexico in at that time, but only after Mexico also institutes strict environmental standards, where the environmental safeguards on the environment in Mexico is just as strong as the ones that we have here. And maybe both countries should have stronger environmental safeguards so that gets factored in the cost of production. People's lives get better. They are healthier with a strong environment, safe environment, clean environment, and they have higher paying jobs in Mexico. And that way, when General Motors goes to Mexico, if it does, they have to pay the Mexican worker a lot more money. The Mexican worker becomes wealthier. They can become middle class, and they can then buy not only products made in Mexico, they can buy new products that we create from the United States to export to Mexico. That's the fair trade model that Germany and Northern Europeans used with the Southern Europeans way back in the 60s when they were changing their common market into a system that would include the Southern Europeans, such as the Greeks and others. Now, many things have happened since then that have caused a lot of problems in the economies in Europe, parts of Southern Europe, especially like Greece. But that, I would argue, has started in the United States with the infection of the Wall Street crash and debacle here, where our banks infected the European banks to a large extent by allowing the home mortgages that were defaulted to be sold over there and then default on the Greek banks and others. And there were other problems with the Greek government. They were not collecting taxes from the richest people in Greece who were hiding their income in Switzerland, and that also cut back on the social safety net. The Greek economy or government had to borrow money to spend on social programs. There was some mismanagement there as well, but a lot of it had to do with a lack of fair trade and the export of jobs in the United States, but the banking system that infected the Greeks. The fair trade model worked for a long time between Germany and Greece, where when the German factories shut down in Germany or moved them over to open new factories in Greece, with the higher wages in Greece, the German factory had to pay higher wages to the Greek workers. The Greek workers lived at a higher standard, had a higher standard of living, and the Greek workers were able to buy the German products, and Germany became one of the world's top export economies, not just to Greece, but to other parts of the world as well. So the United States could learn from some of these other countries' experiences, including our own, when we were the #1 exporter in the world back in the 1950s. And with these free trade agreements, unequal trade, as Frank was pointing out, our government has allowed other countries to take advantage of us. It's allowed the wealthy elites in our country and other countries to take advantage of the working people of those countries and to promote free trade such as NAFTA, CAFTA, TPP, or Trans-Pacific Partnership, which will be the worst free trade agreement that we've had in ages if it gets passed. We got to stop the President and Congress from passing TPP. Here's a phone call coming in. Let's see who's ready to talk about these things. Good evening. You're with Peter Matthews on the air. Who's speaking, please?
Hi, this is Brett Covey. I'm from Long Beach, California.
Good evening, Brett Covey. How are you, sir?
Hi, I'm just fine.
Tell us what you're thinking. What's on your mind today about these issues?
Well, you've kind of covered a lot of stuff, the joblessness and all.
Can you speak up a little bit, please, Brett? We want to get you on the air here. Speak up just a little bit.
Oh, yes. You've covered quite a few issues, the joblessness and how people feel about being off of work and the NAFTA. These are issues that are pretty close to my heart. And
Yes.
I understand too. I don't know if you've really had the experience of being out of work for a long period of time. I have.
Yes.
And you do get that feeling of despair. And I even had the knowledge that from watching documentaries and whatnot, fortunately they're out there, talking about after or during the Great Depression, a good number of people they just felt beaten down.
Yes.
They had no self-worth.
Despair is the word you just used, and it's so apropos. It's so appropriate,
Despair.
Brett. The despair that comes on with
Despair.
losing your job and not having it for years.
So I think that's great to address that. And,
Absolutely.
You mentioned bringing jobs into the United States. I don't remember what you said in the beginning of that.
Oh yes, we need to keep many of our jobs here and also bring new jobs into the United States through creating new technologies here that would come up with products that we can export to other countries and create jobs here, but through fair trade only, not free trade. Free trade is a disaster. It's been a disaster because it's exported all of our jobs to low-wage, cheap labor countries such as Mexico, Indonesia, where Nike took its jobs, China, where Apple took its jobs. Apple builds and assembles the iPhone in China, and it costs them next to nothing to assemble. They actually make $400,000 per employee in profit in producing their products in cheap labor country such as the iPhone in China. And the horrendous conditions of the workers in China who are living in dormitories, 12 to a dormitory, night shift, day shift people trying to sleep in the same dormitory, woken up at 3 in the morning to put the glass cover on the iPhone when an executive in Apple gives the order. They work for 11 hours a day. They work for 7 days a week. They work for 6 or 7 weeks in a row to get the project done. This is the kind of working misery that they have in many of the global south or so-called third world countries that we used to have in this country back in the 1890s. So those sweatshops are going on in the world, Brett. Go ahead, Brett. Talk about the other side of it where despair comes in. Whatever you like to say.
Well, it's really interesting you bring that up, and I think most Americans don't believe that it's that bad. I mean, I do a lot of research, go on the internet, and it is that bad. It's probably even worse. You hear about people jumping out of windows and whatnot. It's pretty extreme.
In China, yes. In those dormitories, there have been such distraught young people. They're mostly people under 30 who've been coming from the countryside who work in those sweatshops in China, in these big parks, the parks to assemble these iPhones. And these young people were so distraught with their kind of work conditions, the despair that they felt at getting paid $1 an hour, Brett, a little over $1 an hour to assemble that iPhone that's sold over here for $700. What do you think of that? And these young people, some of them jumped off the 5th floor of their dormitories and committed suicide. When that happened, you know what the Apple contractor did, Foxconn from Taiwan? You know what they did? They put nets to catch these young people so they wouldn't hit the ground and die. And they caught them and saved their lives. So what happens? Apple executives go to this Chinese factory plant and praises their contractors, saying, "You guys are so humane. You saved lives by putting the nets. Thank you for doing that. And okay, we'll try to work on complying with Chinese labor law," which, by the way, Chinese labor law says that workers can only work 49 hours a week, before they have to get paid overtime. That's the work week in China, 49 hours, not 70 hours as the Apple workers were being forced to work. The Apple contracted workers were being forced to work. So this is something that Apple said they were going to address. It hasn't been addressed. Those Chinese workers are still working 60, 70 hours a week. It's been found by China Labor Watch. It's been found by other human rights groups that have infiltrated those factories and actually sent in people there to observe and to actually take part in the work and find out what's really going on. So this is something, Brett, you say many people here are not aware of it, correct? and they're buying the iPhone and having a great time with it, right? You know, other phones are doing similar things. I mean, even the Samsungs are built that way in many of these labor parks in China. And so what can we do? We have to raise the awareness and demand that Apple make its contractors pay a living wage in China. That way the Chinese workers will have more money in their hands to buy products that we can invent here in the United States. It can be educational products, technology products. It can even be automobiles that would be a modest car that they could buy. As the wages go up in those countries in the third world, global south, then they will be able to purchase our products and make the American workers and the entrepreneurs here well off.
Yeah.
That's the fair trade model.
Note before I go out.
Sure.
I see you don't have a lot of time. I'm not sure that you are aware, and this is a pretty ominous sign. They must be pretty optimistic, but Boeing has announced that it's moving its manufacturing facilities for one of its airliners into China.
Absolutely. In fact, I posted that story on Facebook 2 days ago that Boeing has now announced that it's moving its manufacturing of the 737, I believe that's the jetliner.
Yeah.
The entire airplane will be built in China now. Before this, only some parts of the Boeing airplane were built in China. Now the whole assembly plant is going to be taken to China, and that's another very well high-paying job situation that's going to be lost to American workers. Yeah. Now this is something that is a result of the free trade model, as opposed to fair trade. Am I right?
Yes, and I think it's
devastating.
You could consider it kind of a red flag thing, because do you think that they know something that we don't? That they're making this decision to do this at this time before they pick a president? Because I mean, if Donald Trump got in office, he says he'd bring him back.
Interesting, very interesting consideration. I really hadn't thought of that, but I'm sure decisions are being made in the business world, either made or held off on, waiting to see what's going to happen with this election. So that could very well be the case. We don't know exactly why they made that decision, why Boeing did that, other than just wanting to have cheaper labor and making a lot more profit off the airplane and helping the Chinese build it themselves all the way. So we have to work out a situation where other countries can come here, will bring jobs here also, and pay high union jobs here. I don't believe that Toyota and other companies should be paying non-union workers here in America. The unionized workers, the workers in Toyota plants, some of them are unionized, other ones are not. We need to insist on more unions and unionizing all of our workers in the industries and even in the service sector. That'll help rebuild the middle class in America again. As you know, I've got a book out, Dollar Democracy, with Liberty and Justice for Some, How to Reclaim the American Dream for All. And you have to look at that book. Anyone who would like to look at it, it's available on Amazon, at Barnes & Noble. And that book, other small bookstores as well, independent bookstores, that book deals with this very issue of job export and how it's destroyed the middle class in America, how to bring back that American dream by restructuring us.
I went to your website, and there's at the top of it, I believe it's at the top of it, somewhere you can click on Dollar Democracy, you get this thing, and it gives little excerpts.
Okay. So you went to my website, which is epetermathews.com, epetermathews.com. And when you get there, on the top of the front page, you can click on a link that will take you straight to the Dollar Democracy book. And you get an excerpts from the various chapters in that book so people can get a feel for what the book is about. Thank you, Brett, for doing that and for reminding the public that they can do that also to get a feel for the book. Okay, thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, I must say, brothers and sisters, good night for tonight. We'll see you tomorrow at 8 o'clock, not 7 o'clock, because the presidential debates are going from 6 o'clock to 7:30 Pacific time. At 8 o'clock, we'll be on here to discuss the debate results and to talk to you about the ideas and thoughts that you may have. So please make sure you call in tomorrow at 7:15 after watching the beginning of the show. Sorry, 8:15. From 8 o'clock to 8:30 is the show. The call-in time is 8:15 in the evening at the same number, 562-438-0505. Meanwhile, if you want to get in touch with me, my cell number is 562-234-3319. 562-234-3319. Let's please spread the word. We must continue with a nonviolent political revolution to bring social justice to America and the world. Thank you so much. This is Peter Matthews saying good night.